History that never happened. What would happen if the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were never passed? By Emily Meath. What actually happened? The South, which was mainly made up of large farms and plantations, believed that they needed slavery for the labor. The North felt that this was very unjust, and thus the country ended up split and in a civil war over which side was right. Lincoln had led our country through the turmoil of the Civil War that the North ended up winning. Seeing the injustices of slavery and trying to ensure that we didn't end up right back where we were at some point in history, he passed the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, the 14th Amendment giving rights to these freed African Americans, and the 15th Amendment giving these people the privilege of voting. Crisis point. What if these amendments were vetoed and never added to the Constitution? What would happen if Abraham Lincoln had different views towards the African Americans? What if President Lincoln had been assassinated before these amendments had been passed? Divergence point. If these amendments weren't passed, we would still have slaves in the South benefiting the economy through their inexpensive labor on the plantations. If Lincoln had the same views as the people that wanted to keep the slaves around, he might not have been shot. John Wilkes Booth, Lincoln's assassin, had been a Confederate who was obviously not happy with the laws that Abraham Lincoln had passed. After the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, the remaining leaders in government would have probably been too afraid to continue forward with these ideas of equal rights. Short-term effects. If we still had slavery around, groups like the Ku Klux Klan would have never formed. These groups were made up of former Confederates that became extremists that valued the leadership of whites. They intimidated any African Americans and Republicans that tried to gain political power. Women would have wanted their rights sooner because they weren't happy with their place in society. The women weren't allowed in the business world and were always stuck at home to do the chores and keep an eye on the slaves. They wanted to be able to voice their opinions on the matter, since slavery was a big part of their lives. When they gained their rights, these women would also be able to vote alongside their husbands to either keep or get rid of slavery. Long-term effects. The United States never entered World War II since we saw nothing wrong with Hitler having slaves, same as we do. Without our help, Britain loses this war and totalitarianism spreads around to other countries. Since we wouldn't have been in the war, we would have not had any reason to create the atomic bomb. To remain a major threat in the war, German scientists create the atomic bomb, but Germany never drops it since they were winning and didn't have any large threats. At this time, minorities and African Americans are just getting into politics, so we don't have an African American president today. The Democrats favored free trade and a more active government in the lives of the people. The Democratic Party attracted farmers and immigrants, even though the Republicans were popular for years after slavery was abolished. Questions for discussion. If slaves were still accepted today, would your family own slaves? Would you freely welcome African Americans into your home? Do you think we would still have segregated restrooms and water fountains today? Would our society be welcoming of new types of music created by these people? What if the North never thought that having slaves was unjust?